Hi, my name is Layla Felder. I'm 17 years old and I'm an avid art lover. Come join me as I talk with artists and curators about their art, their processes, and what makes them tick, because we are in conversation.
Perfect. Nice.
Seriously? It was just sitting there?
Well, the guy who owns the barbershop had these chairs sitting in the back, like they got new chairs, and he was getting ready to get rid of these, and I was like, let me have it.
Hello there. I'm here today with the phenomenal Fahamu Pecou.
I've always wanted to be an artist. That's the only thing I've ever wanted to be. From the age of 9 up until I got to college, I specifically wanted to be an animator. Arturo similarly was like, yeah, these cartoons are cool, but what are you trying to say? So every graduating senior has to do like some kind of show. And for an entire year, I worked on this project, like creating objects and creating pieces, things all in conversation with this story. And my exhibition was an installation that recreated the brownstone apartment in Brooklyn, where we lived the night that my mom died. I remember watching people look at the artwork and break down crying. People were coming over to me and saying things like, yo, man, I haven't spoken to my brother in 17 years because we had an argument, and your work makes me want to reach out to them and, mend that wound. Long story short, I was standing back watching these reactions and thinking about these reactions that night, and I realized the answer to that question. So this series is called Trapedemia. Mm-hmm. And Trapedemia is a concept that I've been exploring for a couple of years that considers what we call trap. Mm-hmm. It's more than an aesthetic. Mm-hmm. I argue that trap is a technology, right? Mm-hmm. It's a way that black people,
No worries.
Black people especially, but marginalized people find ways of like circumventing their oppression, mm-hmm. right? So when you're denied full access to resources, you invent new ways of getting that access, right? And so that's what Trapedemia is in a nutshell. Mm-hmm. This particular series with the books was the second iteration of Trapedemia, where the subtitle is Lit, which is a play on words, so triple entendre. Yeah. So it's lit as in literature. Yeah. But it's also lit as in let's turn it up, we lit, you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's also lit as in illuminated. And so a part of the messaging in the Trapedemia 2 series is that you should not judge a book by its cover. And the book that I'm referring to is the black male body, right? Mm-hmm. So when we see what I call these trapped bodies, we often begin to diminish the potential of these people because of how they appear. Yeah. Oh, his pants are sagging, he's an idiot, you know what I mean? Or he's hanging out on the corner, he's up to no good, you know what I'm saying? But you never know what's in the mind, right? And so I juxtapose these trapped bodies with classic African American literature to talk about the brilliance, the inherent brilliance and genius that can be found, in these bodies. But it also talks about the struggle, right? Yeah. In a lot of the cases, the books are on the head because it is a reference to the notion of osmosis, right? Mm-hmm. In proximity to things, we pick up, information and lessons and stuff like that. Yeah. But the books are also, in some cases, like shields or helmets, right? Both protecting and projecting.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I feel like the judge the book by its cover, like it's been used so much and it has a potential to be really cheesy and kind of tired. Mm-hmm. But I've never seen it, shown sort of through this lens before. I think it's new and fresh and funky. And then guess let's look at because these are reference photos, right? You told us these are reference photos that you blew up. It just out of curiosity, how come you like to use yourself in reference photos? Because I know that, you know, some artists don't like to. I hate to.
Well, this is kind of, again, like a sort of evolution of like the Fahamu Pecou and shit sort of construct. Very early on in my career, you know, I was, you know, again, like using my character as a way to sort of like talk about how we market and promote visual artists.
Yeah.
But eventually it became more of a very specific notion of how we read black male bodies, right? And I'm always very deliberate and intentional in saying that I use my body in my work, but these are not self-portraits, right? So like I'm performing, you know, to the ideas and stereotypes that are projected onto black men's bodies.
Yeah.
But I say all that to say that, you know, in like early on in my career, I began to recognize that, or not even in my career, in my life, I began to recognize that oftentimes people failed to see me because they couldn't see past my body as a black male, right? So people assume he must play basketball, he's a black man. I suck at basketball. I suck at any sport. I'm terrible at sports.
Feel that.
I've never been good at any sport. What's up? You know, I'm, you know, on a good day, I'm 145 pounds, right? But if I step onto an elevator with a white woman, I might as well be 6'8" and 300 pounds, right? You know, like her fear of me as a black male is irrational, right? Because of all the ways that the black male body has been dehumanized in our culture, right? And so using my own body allows me to point to the really problematic ways the black male body is read, right? That people don't actually see the person, they just see the body, right? And so using my body over and over and over again, right, begins to kind of dispel some of the preconceived ideas people might have about that body. Because now you see this body in different ways, you know, throughout the corpus of my work, you see this body, you know, pimped out, swagged up, you see it, you know, more like, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Introspective, you know what I mean? You see it more expressive and jumping, leaping, like you see all these different ways. And so, you know, every iteration of this allows for people to expand their idea of who this being could be, who this person could be.
I like that you said that it's you, but it's not a self-portrait, because I've never thought about it that way. But when I think about it, I've never looked at any of your work and been like, oh yeah, that is a self-portrait by Fahamu. It's just like, no, that's a person, and the face is Fahamu's, or the body is Fahamu's. And I think that's really interesting. Is there anything that you do specifically to differentiate it from a self-portrait, or is it just the attitude that you make it with? Do you think translates?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of that, a little bit of the attitude. Like, I mean, you know, one of the things that was always really funny to me when I first started showing my work around the country and around the world is like I would have a show in San Francisco, right? I would fly to San Francisco, sight unseen. I haven't met the gallery or the galleries or anything like that. They pick me up at the airport to drop me to my hotel. The ride over, we're having a conversation. By the time I get ready to get out of the car at the hotel, they're like, oh, wow, you're nothing like I thought you were going to be, next one, oh, you're actually really quiet. Oh, you're actually really smart. I didn't, you know what I mean? Like those kinds of things, which is another reason why I use my own body, because again, it works to dispel people's like ideas about who I am.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that, but also I don't include like my tattoos, for example, when I paint, you know, the figure, right? You know, I never paint like my wedding ring, or you know what I mean, like stuff like that. So things that are like me, like I don't include in it. So that it's just really just about the body.
That is so interesting. That like something as little as a wedding ring or a tattoo can. I never thought of that. Man, knowledge, you guys. Learning learning new things. It's heckin' cool. I think the last thing that I was curious about, because earlier when the camera was off, I was asking you about languages, and you were mentioning that you were speaking French. And you said you were in France a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a big audience in France?
I do. I have a big audience in Europe.
Really?
Yeah.
How did that how did that happen, start? What was that?
Maybe around 2007 or so.
Mm-hmm.
The gallery I show it, in New York was, since 2006 it started showing me at the international art fairs. Mm-hmm. Like Art Basel in Miami, Art Basel in Switzerland, you know what I mean, things like that. Mm-hmm. And there's it's a circuit, right? Most of the galleries that show in that circuit, they move together to the different cities. Mm-hmm. There was a gallery in Paris that started buying a lot of my work whenever we would do the fairs. They buy 2, 3 here, 2, 3 here. Ultimately, one of the gallery assistants broke off from that gallery and started her own gallery, mm-hmm. and I was the first artist that she began representing. This is now 2010. And yeah, she's just done, they have done an amazing job in marketing and promoting my work and, getting me out there. So I have a huge collector base, throughout Europe. In fact, in 2017, I had a retrospective exhibition in Paris. It was over 50 works from just European collections.
Wow.
Yeah, spanning from 2006 to up to 2014. So an 8-year spread over 50 works. Yeah.
Man, how much of the time are you in Europe, in a non-COVID scenario?
At least once a year. Nice. Sometimes more, sometimes twice, you know what I mean? But, yeah.
Cool. Is there anything else you want to...
Does it surprise you that you have a big audience in Europe?
It did in the beginning. Because there's so much cultural innuendo, mm-hmm. I think, in my work, that's very specific to African American mm-hmm. culture, things that I find funny, mm-hmm. That I don't think anybody else is gonna get.
Yeah.
And then, it would never fail to blow my mind. I'd be at a show in Paris or something, and somebody would come up, some scraggly kid, mm-hmm. comes in and say, yo, when you said X, Y, and Z, that's from De La Soul's 3 Feet Higher Rising on the interlude between track 4 and 5. I love that line. And I'd be like, damn! And people in the States would not even get the reference, right?
Yeah.
But they understand, and it helped me also to see the ways in which European perspective on Black American culture is very different than white American perspective on Black American culture, right?
Yeah.
And the ways in which people outside of the United States study, what we do here, and that was a culture shock to me. But I'm always really fascinated by that. I'm always really appreciative of the conversations. I've had some really amazing conversations with my European collectors and fans about African American culture and history, and not just African American, but African Diaspora culture and history. When in 2013, I was having a show in Paris, and I was making reference to the Harlem Renaissance and Black cultural expression, Black Renaissance expression. And my gallerist, Delphine in Paris, she translated something that I said to use the word negritude. Mm-hmm. I was like, negritude? What is that?
Mm-hmm.
She was like, you don't know about the negritude? I was like, no. And then I looked it up and mind blown, right? So around the same time of the Harlem Renaissance, like the 1920s and 30s, there was a big movement in the Francophone diaspora, where people like Aimé Césaire, Leopold Senghor, like these people from different Caribbean islands like Martinique and countries in Africa came to study in France and began to express the culture shock that they received around their notions of blackness, right? Like what it meant to be black. Like, now it's a whole new conversation on like black agency and autonomy and creativity and art and poetry. And so the negative movement is running concurrent to the Harlem Renaissance movement, which is also this like black Renaissance, in art and culture.
Yeah.
And just the connections, it was just really fascinating to me. And that sent me down another rabbit hole, right? Like I began to make comparisons between the literature and poetry of the Negritude movement and hip hop, which have a lot of similar ideas and concepts that are, going back and forth. And so I would do these like mashups, between the poetry and the lyrics in hip hop, stuff like that. So, it just, it's like, everywhere we go, there we are. You know what I mean? Like that's become my sort of like mantra in terms of thinking about blackness. Like my expression of blackness is no longer relegated to the experience here in the United States, but it's like I really try to have a global diasporic understanding of blackness, because everywhere in the world where black people are, our stories are similar.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I have a couple more questions. So how did you get your piece on Blackish, and how has that changed your collector base in America?
So how did that happen?
Just being the shit.
Well, okay, so let's chalk it up to the internet. Really, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm still blown away. Like when I go to the grocery store and people come up to me like, "Are you?" You know what I mean? Like, but I think Kenya Barris, who created the show, was a fan of my work. And apparently going to Clark, Atlanta, and stuff like that. But yeah, he reached out. He liked that particular piece, and they wanted to include it on the show. And how has it changed the collector base? I don't know. I think it's still evolving. Like social media has really, really changed the level of engagement. Because prior to 2015, 2016, my collector base was largely older, affluent, white people.
Wow.
Who are collectors, right?
Yeah.
And it like, as much as my work is about like the black experience, black people weren't necessarily buying art like that. There were a few here and there who were collecting art, but like the entertainers and people like that. Like that's a relatively new. Like when Jay-Z did that Picasso baby thing, like, and started talking about his Basquiat's and Warhols and stuff like that, then more and more like entertainers were like, art? You know what I'm saying? And so that changed a lot of the conversations that people were having about and with black artists. Part of the reason that my early paintings were on the covers of magazines, right, and art magazines specifically, was about the fact that we didn't exist in those spaces. When I first started making those paintings in 2003, it's very, very, very rare. I mean, maybe once every 2 years, you would see a black artist in the magazine. You didn't see them on the cover. You know what I'm saying? And it might be Kerry James Marshall, might be in there. And then Kahinde came along, and then you might get Kahinde. And then Kara Walker, you might get Kara Walker, right? But you didn't see us on the covers of magazines. You didn't see us in those magazines. So I was very intentional and deliberate about putting us on those covers, right? So I put my character, like, I only painted art magazines, you know, or like cultural magazines, and put my character on there with all the swag and the middle fingers and the bravado, you know what I'm saying? Because it was like, you're not going to deny the presence of us.
Yeah. I like it. I mean, we do exist. Yeah.
And now we are the thing. Like every magazine wants, you know, black people on their cover. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I laugh at it, you know, a little bit now. But it's like, you know, we didn't exist in those spaces. But I also wanted to make a point about your question about Blackish, because that has been like a kind of like a full circle moment for me, right? Like as I mentioned before, like, you know, I grew up watching Good Times and JJ and making this art, and that was the thing that made me want to be an artist. And now to have my work on a show like Blackish, you know, maybe there's a little kid out there who sees that one day and is like, I want to be an artist like that. You know what I mean? Like, so that's been a really like one of my most cherished achievements in my career, is to have my work in spaces like shows like Blackish or The Shy or like you know, those kind of programs.
And how has it been for you, like when the High asked you to join their board, what was that like for you to be invited to be in the room? Like how was that for you? And then also tell us about ADAMA.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things about the High Museum, the relationship that I have with the High Museum that's really like also super like special and endearing to me, is that was the first museum that I ever went into in my life. You know what I'm saying? Like that was my first experience with the museum, was the High Museum of Art. Yeah. And so even before joining the board, I was invited to do an exhibition at the High Museum. Like, you know what I mean? Like that was amazing to me. And I, you know, to this day, I'm so grateful to Michael Brooks for that opportunity, because that was really again like a full circle kind of moment for me. But prior to joining the board, I would often get calls from Michael Shapiro when he was the director to ask my opinion about something. Like, what do you think about this? Or, you know, what can we be doing about this? You know what I mean? And so I was, you know, kind of really got a X, Y, and Z. Like, you know, I remember having conversations with them about how they're communicating to different communities, right? And the High Museum, you know, God bless their soul, have been here for a very long time. Yeah. You know, a staple in Atlanta for, you know, over 100 years. But in that time, for the majority of that time, have only had to communicate with a certain audience. Yeah. And have not quite figured out how to communicate their presence, their importance, to the different communities that museum serves. Yeah. Right. And so a lot of what I hope to bring to the museum through my board, you know, membership and stuff like that is you know, helping to build those bridges and helping to establish that voice. And similarly, you know, I started my own museum now, ADAMA, the African Diaspora Art Museum of Atlanta, for all of the reasons that I just named about, you know, the sort of shortcomings of the High Museum. Yeah. You know, we live in a city that touts itself as the Black cultural mecca of the United States, and we don't have, you know, art institutions that reflect that voice. Yeah. You know, like culture here doesn't really move beyond entertainment. Yeah. So like, how do we push that conversation beyond, you know, hip hop? Yeah. You know, and that's not a knock to hip hop or anything by any stretch of the imagination, but there's much more to Atlanta and to Black Atlanta than hip hop. So anyway, recognizing that void in Atlanta, you know, I came up with the concept for the African Diaspora Art Museum of Atlanta. I didn't want to just focus on African American culture again. You know, I think Atlanta is an international city.
Yeah.
We have people here from everywhere. We have consulates here from everywhere. We have we have the largest airport, the busiest airport in the world. So why wouldn't we be a global destination for Black art and culture?
Yeah.
So that's what ADAMA seeks to become. We want to be a destination. We want to be a space where artists, art enthusiasts, collectors, everybody can come and know that they can get their dose of Black art and culture globally right here in the city.
Is it open? Can people visit it?
So we don't have a physical space yet,
Okay.
but we are open. We're virtual, so we have a number of projects and virtual programming things that we offer. We're also consulting and working with other organizations. In fact, we're actually working on a big project with the High Museum now. It's a project called Permanent, where we're activating works by African and African American artists in the High's permanent collection. And when I say activating, ADAMA is partnered with Kamase Dance Theater and Orchestra Noir to interpret works in the permanent collection through these different voices, right? So you get the visual, Kamase choreographs, dance routines that are in conversation with the work. Orchestra Noir composes original music that are in conversation with the work, so that we can create experiences that allow for our communities to have a deeper connection to these art objects, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that ADAMA is really invested in is transforming the perceptions of art within our community, right? Because of a history of racism and disenfranchisement, Black people have a kind of a disconnect when it comes to like the fine arts, and particularly spaces like the High Museum, where they're still trying to get those numbers up, right?
Yeah.
Because those spaces have not traditionally been welcoming or inviting, to our community.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways that ADAMA is hoping to remedy that is by making art more of an experience, right? Because the way we experience art is very different than other communities of people.
Yeah.
We go to movies and we talk to the screen. You know what I'm saying? Like, we go to art shows and it's like our art experiences are interdisciplinary.
Yeah,
You know
it's
what I'm
like all the senses sort of
Yes.
it's like a full
Exactly.
thing.
Yeah. So we
Yeah.
want to create those kinds of engagements and opportunities that really transform our understanding of art and culture, and create spaces again that are not only inviting to us, but that are also reflective of us.
I love that. Is there a link that I can
Yes.
plug?
So ADAMA is ADAMATL.org, ADAMATL.org. You can get this lovely ADAMA swag on the website as well. And you can also see some of our programming, like the ADAMA Art Salon. It's archived on the website. You can get information about upcoming programs and initiatives that we're doing. And we're on Instagram as well at ADAMATL.
Perfect. Go there, follow them, and what's your Instagram handle?
I'm Fahamu Pecou.
Follow him,
Yeah.
because he's fantastic. He's creating so much amazing stuff. There's only a couple in here, but you guys seriously, go online, go on his Instagram, check out all the things. You will not regret it. His art is fantastic, and if you can, buy some. I would if I could. Thank you so much, Fahamu.
Pleasure. Thank you.
This was Fahamu Pecou. You guys, go check him out.
How many did he give you?
He just gave me that one, but he has two more. They're just so heavy and hard to move. So.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna go back and get another one.
Nice. I'm so tempted to sit in it.